I can hear you in channel 2, yes? On the stage here? No problem. Test, 1, 2, test 2. Test 2, test mic. Okay. Test mic, test mic. There is a handheld mic as well on here. Do you mind if we try this one as well? Test 1, 2, test 1, 2. You still get this one? This one, test 1, 2. Oh, it's not loud enough? Okay. Do you mind just sending more to the interpreters on the handheld mic, please? Test 1, 2. Test 1, 2. Test 1, 2. Test handheld mic. Test handheld mic. 1, 2. Handheld mic. Test 1, 2. Is there any difference on your side? It's better. Thank you. Okay. There is a second one as well, yeah? It's good, okay. Okay. I'm going back to the table mics. Table mic, test 1, 2, testing. Test table mic, table mic. Test mic, table mic. This last one on the table mic. Okay. I'm not sure at what point it would be used, but I just see it on the table, so that's why I just tested it. No. You're welcome. Thank you. Yeah.
switcher peut-être sur les écrans. Je fais un coup de switch.
ICH, no? ICT.
The ICT.
Yes.
Okay. And
Let
then.
me see Professor Park is around because he's going to do the
Alright, no, you
presentation.
stay here. You're already late.
Can I go just to...
Okay.
Since you work with him.
Alright, so you can do your lead.
Yes.
Okay. Or first of all, I'm gonna welcome everyone. We'll do your lead.
Okay.
Okay. So.
Maybe when you welcome everyone, I just hear that the assessor thinks that we have delays so that they will maybe you can say something about that.
Stop. Yes, yes, yes.
And we should thank the host country as well.
Of course.
And yet,
Do you have a resume?
sorry?
Do you have a brief of your of each speaker? What is it going to say?
The abstract, just use the abstract that they sent.
Okay. Yeah, I have it. You guys have internet?
Yes. Okay, capacity building and ethical principles are yours.
You need anything else?
Okay.
Otherwise, me and Aranya will go to sit in for a bit.
Okay.
Yeah, is that okay?
Sure.
Yeah.
I will join you in a bit.
Okay. Ethical principles and capacity building are yours.
Nice t-shirt.
Now you pass my bags.
Very appropriate.
They lost our bags. Okay. Okay, you know what? I changed my mind.
I'm sorry.
No, I changed my mind
Okay.
because I don't know much about these. You're going to take the ones that I don't know.
Okay.
So you're going to take capacity building, you're going to take ethical principles, okay? And you're going to take, okay, so I'll do the introduction, and then I'll do your read, because I know Italian. Alright, and then I'll do research, and then you do capacity building, ethical principles, then I'll do shaping safeguarding experiences, and ICT.
Then lunch.
And then lunch, and then I'm just going to leave.
Okay.
No,
Good.
honestly, like I'm like, you do everything after lunch.
Okay. Nice t-shirt.
It is either this one or the Emirates one.
Okay.
It's just, he's so gangster.
Yeah.
I thought it was cool for the plane,
Okay.
not for the meeting.
Yeah, I know. And so, which is the internet? 13 minutes.
UNESCO 30.
How are you, my friend? Good to see you.
Did you arrive to the
Not yet. No, I came straight here. Yeah.
So
When did you arrive? Yesterday.
yesterday? So
Okay, that's
we're
good.
also
Are you still at that hotel? You read that other? Oh, very good. Oh, very good. Okay. Wait, come on, yeah. Okay, good. Good. Oh, wonderful. Okay, that's great.
yeah.
Okay, well, because I didn't have a chance. I was so busy, I didn't get a chance. Okay.
here's my, you want me to, you want, put it on the,
Oh, okay, it's working. Okay. Okay, so this will be it here, right? Albert,
Yes, but
just stand
we
here.
should have
Well,
this one
we have no control over it.
These mics will not work. Okay?
no, but
No, but this one works.
Yeah.
Yeah. Someone has been turning it on and off, but
Yeah.
monitoring
There is
it
a
properly.
gentleman somewhere. I
Yeah.
don't know
Okay.
where, controlling it.
Okay.
As usual. As usual.
is anything functioning or
So Albert, here, I'll give you the mic.
okay?
Okay, because you're gonna.
Okay, yes, hello. Test 1, 2, 3.
We are missing
Just
there is one on the floor.
so
Here, do you want some help?
can you put it on the
One more. Is here. Yes, but there is one missing. Which is not really cool, but well, we need the fourth one because it's it's standing on its own.
So, and now I have to find my official court photographer. So we are the observer, but our country is now in the Intergovernmental Committee, you know?
Yeah.
The expert. Okay, hello. It's nice to meet you all. Great. Yeah, how are you? Yeah, very good. Thank you. Just Voodoo Ceremonies? Well, unfortunately, definitely do his presentation in French. Yes, well, if there's translation, I will, for sure, for sure. Already installed your PowerPoint?
Okay.
So this is the on-off button. Even kijken. And it's better, I think, but that's the complicated thing. I don't know what he's doing if you are now taking a picture. He's switching it.
Okay.
This is not necessary.
So I
It should
check, yeah.
so like this, and then and you have like this.
Yes. And you have you take it like on the green,
yes.
I think so.
The green.
Yes. I have the it's a one Nikon one.
Nikon. Nikon.
Nikon, yeah, cool pic. Okay. I have nearly the same.
So
Yes. Okay.
okay.
I will try it.
Getting everything done, prepared and ready.
I don't know where I'm going to stand, but I think over there somewhere. But have a look.
Good morning, everyone. Let us start the symposium, so please take your seats.
But yeah, I've never met Robert, so I don't know what
Yes,
he looks
I've
like.
met him. I've met him in Brussels once, and
Do you think they just sort of went and
he's almost the
crashed
same
out?
age as we have, I think.
Okay.
Only when you start.
Yeah, we don't want to start late.
We are the second.
Oh, we started
Okay.
10:30.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for being here. We're really glad to see you all here. Getting together before the rush of the IGC meeting start is an important opportunity for us to exchange our thoughts and ideas and our reflections on the year that has passed. Before we do start, I do want to thank the host country for providing this room for us to meet in today. I also want to thank the Secretariat for their exceptional support also in the lead up to this meeting. And I do want to make known that we've been told that there are a few planes from Africa that have been delayed. And therefore our colleague Leonce isn't able to join us today, but he will be with us tomorrow. So before we start the presentations today, I want to introduce Susanna Nutkin from the Secretariat, who would like to say a few words.
Thank you very much, Reem. Thank you very much. Good morning to everybody. Good morning to all NGOs who have come to this 13th session of the Intergovernmental Committee for the Safeguarding of the Intangible Cultural Heritage. We're always delighted to see the strong civil society participation. You play a very important role in the implementation of the convention and also through the evaluation body and advising the committee. It is wonderful to see that the NGO Forum has developed over these years and that you will be electing your new steering committee this week, if I learned correctly. So that's a big moment, I know, for you as an NGO Forum, and it's nice for us as the Secretariat to see these developments, because you're indeed very, very active. So you will have an orientation session, I think, tomorrow. There's always also the information. You have your second part of the forum this afternoon. So I know you're in very good hands. You're being informed through your steering committee about things that happen. If ever you have any questions to the Secretariat, please do not hesitate to talk to the team here, which is sitting over there. Helena Drobna, you already know. There's Marius Tukai. There's also Guillaume Alonso from our office in Senegal, and myself. So feel free if there's anything we can do for you. And otherwise, I wish you a very successful forum. And we're also looking forward to your statement during the session tomorrow at the opening. The NGOs traditionally make a statement to tell us, or tell the committee about what you have done. So that is also always very welcome. And with this, I wish you a successful session.
Thank you.
Thank you, Susanna. Okay, so let's dive right in. According to our agenda, our first presentation is about the role of NGOs in the 2003 convention. Perhaps recently or lately, the phrase inter alia has been coming up in a lot of our communications and our discussions. What are NGOs currently doing under the convention, and what more can we do? How can we expand this role to allow us to play a more active, efficient, and deeper role in the safeguarding of intangible cultural heritage, and in cooperation with the committee? Our colleague Jorien is going to present a presentation about this topic. So, Jorien, over to you.
Good morning to all. I will bring you a 20-minute presentation introducing on the topic, because a lot will be spoken about the inter alia process, the role of NGOs, and the revision of accreditation process in the coming days. Some of you were present at the General Assembly, where we had a first informal session already with the NGOs on the topic. So part of what I will tell you will be repetition for part of you, but I also elaborated it further because half year has passed and things have happened in that half year. So that's an update as well, but so that we are all on the same level to start our debates and reflections today. Okay. First of all, in the UNESCO 2003 Convention's text on NGOs, there are actually two levels or approaches where NGOs are mentioned in the text of the convention itself, and then in the operational directives. It makes a discernation or a differentiation between the advisory roles at the international level and then advisory roles at the national level. First, for the NGOs, the advisory roles at the international level, in Article 9, the Convention mentions that accreditation of NGOs with recognized competence in the field of ICH by the General Assembly on committee proposal to act in an advisory capacity to the committee. So that's the reference frame where you see already the accreditation of NGOs coming up. This is elaborated in the operational directives. First of all, in a few operational directives on the criteria and the process for accreditation of NGOs, which we will not be speaking about very much today, but we did have some time on the agenda tomorrow on the general meeting to further reflect with all of you on this accreditation process itself. Today we will focus more on the roles of NGOs as such. But of course, it's together, this role of NGOs and the criteria. It's an exercise that is referring to each other, so it will come up with new ideas for the criteria and the accreditation process for NGOs at the end. Operational Directive 96 is the very inter alia one, so I will read it for you. NGOs have advisory functions that can include inter alia, so among others, evaluation reports on nominations, good practices, international assistance requests and effects of safeguarding plans on elements inscribed on urban safeguarding lists, which is in fact mostly the work that happens in the evaluation body, as you all know. Then there's the operational directive on the evaluation body, and a final operational directive where NGOs are mentioned on the support that can be given to NGOs from the fund to participate in the meetings. On the national level, Article 11b states that states parties should identify and define the intangible heritage in its territory with the participation of communities, groups and individuals and relevant NGOs. This will be part of our reflection, I guess, because relevant NGOs, what is it? What does it mean? Which competences does it bring? And so on. And again, in the operational directives, going with the convention, then we find a number of operational directives that elaborate on parts of this. For example, there is Operational Directive 90, which actually takes again this sentence of involvement of relevant NGOs to identify, define and safeguard ICH in cooperation with other actors involved in implementing the convention. Then there is the important notion in Operational Directive 93, where it is stated that the committee should pay attention to the principle of equitable geographical representation in putting NGOs forward for accreditation. And that accredited NGOs should abide by applicable domestic and international legal and ethical standards. Both parts of this sentence are relevant in the reflections as well. The ones that were present among you or that have read or followed the discussion of the General Assembly. In the General Assembly in June, there has been a lot of reflection among the states parties about the regions that have less representation of NGOs and how we could work on that from the side of the NGOs, but also from the states parties to come up with more NGOs involvement from all the regions or in a more equitable way. On the other hand, of course, the convention has been working on the ethical principles in the past years. So here it refers to the domestic and the international legal and ethical standards, but I think there is also a new standard since 2015, that's the ethical standards of the convention itself. Further, there's an operational directive that mentions that the secretariats shall facilitate exchange of information among NGOs and other stakeholders. And then there's a few operational directives on reporting, and that the states parties are encouraged to include information from relevant NGOs and other actors in the periodic reports on the elements and so on. And further, a newer one or a newer operational directive is the question that states parties are encouraged to foster scientific studies and research methodologies, including those conducted by NGOs and others, on the value of ICH safeguarding for sustainable development. So this gives you already an overview of what is in the text. It's not that very much, but there's some interesting entrances to reflect upon. Now I will take you through the accreditation of NGOs as such. So if we look back on the history of the convention, accreditation of NGOs has started in 2008 after that operational directives for the convention were launched at the Second General Assembly. Up to date, the General Assembly has in total accredited 202 such organizations. You can see on the slide the number of each session, but it makes in total that 176 after 7GA are accredited. And as you can see, it's not the most recent figure, but it gives a good indication of the distribution. And as we all know, there is an overrepresentation of European NGOs, and this is something to work on. So if we go to see which functions are currently the core functions of NGOs in the convention, it's mostly limited to the evaluation reports on the nominations, good practices and international assistance requests, and then doing so within the evaluation body. But if we go and see, as you all can see, if there's only 6 NGOs in the evaluation body, there's many more NGOs that are coming to the meetings, coming to the sessions, feel involved with what happens in the convention, come to participate in the sessions of the General Assembly and of the Intergovernmental Committee. And a few years ago, actually it's a long time ago already, almost from the beginning in 2008, NGOs found themselves as observers in the back of the room and have started to find also ways to interact among NGOs themselves and to have a kind of organization to exchange, but also to formulate their voice together within the framework of the convention. So the meetings starting mostly from Abu Dhabi, and NGO statements followed soon. And then from 2012 onwards, the real forum organization has taken form. The forum itself, as you know, I don't need to introduce that very much here, acts as a platform for communication, networking and exchange and cooperation for NGOs accredited by UNESCO. And we have been developing the forum along several lines. You can go to the next slide. First of all, the symposium was one of the main activities to be developed from 2011 on, which we use always to organize at the committee meetings. Last year was an exception because we had the first global capacity building introduction with NGOs, but this year again we are here together for the symposium, and we always reflect on a topic that is at stake and is in the current reflection of the convention. Very soon we also started with having working groups, which today are at the core of our symposium actually, in this reflection on the roles, which again devote themselves to topics to which NGOs can contribute for the development of issues and challenges the convention is facing. The online journal Heritage Alive for sharing safeguarding experiences was started also soon after, and there have been a few extra international conferences also, like the one organized with ICCAP in Jeonju in 2014, or like the one in 2015 in Santa Susanna, where we came up as a result with the steering committee for the first time, and which was organized by or facilitated by ENS Catalunya, one of the NGOs in the forum, who was hosting that conference at the time. So next to that, there's a few lines we are really engaging in. That's the international networking and cooperation among NGOs. Act as a contact point for NGOs to the Secretariat and the states parties and to other actors that want to get in touch with accredited NGOs. We receive many emails which we distribute or we facilitate and so on. So we act as an instigator and a partner in the international cooperation on this convention. We have engaged a lot. I did not see Gabriele yet, but Jorge is here, of course, in communication on the website, social media, and newsletter, which has been growing, and it still is very much growing on the moment, because this is an important aspect for all of us who are not there, but also for all of us who are here, to have the same ground of information for all of us. Then the governance issue, of course, which we have been working hard on in the last 5 years. After a few informal years, we have started up to have general meetings where we took decisions together. And then after a preliminary coordination group since 2012, then the first steering committee was adopted, actually. It was not an election, but it had as a goal to elaborate the institutional framework and the committee for the future, which this year we will let's say, finish, because for the first time we will have a fully elected steering committee for the forum. We also founded an NGO, the association of the forum, and started up a bank account to have clear and transparent process on that part. We have the rules of procedure that were adopted in 2016 and have been developed since, and so on. And then in relation to UNESCO and the convention, of course, we assist or participate in the meetings, the General Assembly and the Intergovernmental Committee, where we are all together, but also in some working groups like the one on the overall results framework, where with a number of NGOs from the steering committee, we actively participated to voice the NGO contribution to that. We coordinate with the Secretariat. We act as a contact point, as I already said, and there are a few processes which will come up later today and in the discussions throughout this week, where we have been particularly engaging in. That's capacity building, regional networking, the overall results framework, and then there's also a few things that we really further outroll and developed, as the outreach to civil society involvement, and further engage also with the lighter ways of sharing safeguarding experiences, and to develop the reflection on the intermediary role of accredited NGOs. So this gives an idea of the diversity and focus of the activities, which actually is like a roadmap for the way forward. I think it's like 4 years ago that we realized that we would need to make a next step with the forum, and that on the one hand, this is a step on the content on which all the working groups are working. We need to proceed the governance and the organization itself, but we also needed a strategy, how to go about with NGO involvement in the convention. And for that, we adopted, together with all of you, a twofold approach. On the one hand, we would engage with capacity building so that all the NGOs involved would have the same level of knowledge on the convention as the same basis to depart from. On the other hand, we would link this to regional networking to be started up and to be elaborated in the years to come. We're not very much there yet, but we have started it like last year to strengthen actually also the regional processes, which then come together in the international process of the forum. And of course, this is mirrored also in the exercise on the revision of the accreditation for the future. So this links to the second decade of the convention and the new issues which are at stake in the convention as a whole, which relate to the overall results framework, where also you will have noticed that the idea of reporting with the regions is coming up since last year, so that there's some processes that are running in parallel. Also the insight that the outreach to civil society involvement is really a working point for the whole of the convention, and for which NGOs could play an important role: sustainable development, ethics, and so on. So then if we go to see accredited NGOs and the reflection on the role of NGOs, actually this is a discussion which has been going on for many years. And the ones of you who have been following the meetings throughout the years will know that the discussion we have today, or the reflection we have today, is not a new one. We have talked about it over and over again. Just to remind you of what has happened in the past years, I think the most discussion have started at 8Com in Baku, where there was the report of the Internal Oversight Service of UNESCO on the methods of the 6 cultural conventions, and which there had been a questionnaire also to the NGOs, and in the report that was brought to the states parties, there were 4 out of 24 recommendations which regarded NGOs at that time, which was at that time also very impressive, actually, because it was like suddenly the NGOs were part of a more general reflection, and this idea of the role of NGOs really came up in that report. And it was stated there that a further challenge related to the consultation and involvement of communities and NGOs in developing policies, legislation, sustainable development plans, and so on. It was also the moment where, for the first time, the criteria for accreditation and evaluation were under scrutiny, because it would be the year to come where the first cycle of NGOs that had been accredited would also make their report. So this evaluation was at stake at that moment. It raised a discussion among the committee, and actually it was decided at that time not to change anything yet, but to follow what happens with the accredited NGO so far, and to, yeah, I will take a little bit more. And to make an evaluation later on. It would have happened in 2014, but actually there was no change at that time, and it's only last year, as you all know, and after the second review, that the roles of NGOs were again on the agenda and have been put on the agenda very strongly now. So in a general way, if you look at the affluence of the NGOs, the strong interest of NGOs, we're 176 now, this expresses a strong involvement of NGOs with this convention. That's one part of it. On the other hand, you have what we have seen in the convention text, you have this distinction which is very much focused on making a differentiation between the international level and the national level. Among NGOs in the past years, we have seen that actually there's many types of NGOs relating to the convention, very varied as relating to their working context, but also relating to, for example, their positioning between governments and bearers or practitioners of intangible heritage. The scope and the territorial scope, from very local to worldwide organization, the scope of their aims and activities. We have, for example, NGOs in our midst that are really focusing on one element, but we have also NGOs which, for example, focus on participation or something else. And in terms of what kind of expertise predominates within these NGOs, there's a huge differentiation also. So the current criteria, which was also stated by repetition in some of the conclusion of the Secretariat in the reports in the years before on NGOs, the current criteria of accreditation offer no tools to gain insight, refine or differentiate among this group of accredited NGOs so far. So this is the reflection. I just put this on the screen because I will share the PowerPoint with you afterwards, and then you can look up the documents for yourself. This reflection has been going on, and for example, in the statement in Baku, in the next slide, it was already stated by the NGOs that, for example, NGOs may help to develop alternate lighter touch ways of sharing safeguarding experiences. We might contribute to the definition of policies, legislation, and so on relating to sustainable development. We may complement the data in the periodic reports. And so that's much more than the role of serving the evaluation body, also other roles might be thought of. And then last year, as you know, in the 12th COM meeting, there was this invitation to take stock of the current situation and the challenges regarding the participation of NGOs to act in an advisory capacity of to the committee. And there was the invitation to reflect with the Secretariat, the informal ad hoc working group of the committee, and in consultation with the accredited NGOs on the possible ways in which the participation of NGOs under the convention could be further enhanced, and how this would be reflected following in the accreditation and renewal mechanisms of NGOs, which at this 13 sessions we will hear the first results about. And again, there it was stated to have an eye for the underrepresented electoral groups. And the next slide, I took a part of the text of last year to be discussed, the overall purpose of the reflection to move towards a system that might be more flexible or flexible enough to allow the committee to benefit from the diverse sets of expertise and services of NGOs in the field of ICH, since this is key for linking the convention to communities and grassroots organizations, and at the same time for ensuring that the convention can continue to evolve in line with the experiences of the international community at large. So actually the insights of the committee are running very much to the insights that last year's we developed among NGOs ourselves, which gives a good ground for the reflection being put together. In the current documents under scrutiny for the 13th committee session, there's two documents where you will find these ideas. On the one hand, there's the document 13, which is really about the NGO reflection, and then there's the other one, the document 16, that is a report from the ad hoc informal working group, where there's also a chapter on the NGO, so please have a look at that. And then we received with the forum a letter from the Secretariat and an invitation to take part in this consultation, which we have started up in 2018 already, with several activities. At the 7th General Assembly, we had an open introduction and exchange like we will have here today, but of course at the General Assembly many NGOs are not able to be present. That's also why we decided to do it again here with more NGOs present. We had a working group, and then today we have this international symposium. There have also been already first consultations with the Secretariat and the informal ad hoc working group. There was a first informal meeting in June with the steering committee, and then, as you all know, there has been the electronic consultation. As a result from what has happened already in these meetings, the open NGO meeting, we had 3 questions to the NGOs present there, and we exchanged about it. What was the motivation of the NGO to request accreditation back in time, so before getting accredited? What did they expect from being accredited? And what did they consider their NGO could offer to the convention? What was very strong in this group reflection on that moment is that, on the one hand, the very important value of recognition that accreditation brings for NGOs. It was also very clear that networking, the opportunity of networking with fellow NGOs and other actors around the convention and on ICH safeguarding was very high in what was expressed, and the possibility of sharing expertise and knowledge. That was actually the 3 things that were coming up most with the NGOs. But that was just an initial reflection. Then we had a specially devoted working group session at the 7GA, in which a number of colleagues present here today have contributed. It was the day after the 7th General Assembly, where we had some proposals for further elaboration. One was to map the or to make an overview of all the mentions on NGOs in the convention documents, which is already in this presentation, but could be further completed. Then to map the functions of the committee. The Article 7 of the convention describes the functions of the committee. And actually, as the NGOs are invited to deliver services to the committee, it's interesting to relate the exercise on the roles of NGOs also to the function of the committee itself. And then on the other hand, to map the capacity, the competences that are present among the NGOs, which could be done, for example, by a survey or a database. So to get better view of which competences are present among NGOs. Another suggestion was really to work on reinforcing the role of the forum itself as an umbrella organization and focal point. And on the other hand, not to lose track of the important position of NGOs as non-governmental organizations themselves. We have this chance of having lighter, more informal ways of acting, bringing in multiple voices, caring for inclusive involvement, and also to contribute beyond formal frameworks of policy and so on safeguarding, to do studies, to have these innovative experiments which are sometimes more difficult in formal contexts. That's actually the freedom NGOs can contribute to the implementation of the convention. We will spread the document with all this where it is elaborated, but just to give you a sense already, in this introduction, there's this Article 7 of the, it's a bit small maybe for you to read now, in the convention, and we have made a comparison between the functions of the convention and then first ideas of what this could mean to NGOs. We will circulate the document via email, and tomorrow evening we will also further discuss in the general meeting. But this gives you already an idea of how much is possible actually if you start looking at the function of the committee. There's a huge possibility of functions NGOs could fulfill there. To finish, it's not only looking at the roles of NGOs, but we also need to think about the boundary conditions and the sensibilities that are at stake. One question which has come up also throughout the years is that this number of NGOs is actually not feasible for the Secretariat to manage next to all the files that are already in the office and so on, so that we should find ways to reduce the administrative burden for the Secretariat as an effect of the NGO's activity in the convention. Another question is how to improve the governance structure and the institutional continuity, as well as the visibility of the forum to be a focal point and building connection and trust with the states parties. I think we are already well underway, but that much more can be done, and it came also up in the meeting with the ad hoc informal working group that they really hope that we will keep further progress on that line. And then, of course, the question of spurring accreditation in underrepresented regions. And there was also a question about ethics and conduct of NGOs, which we need to reflect further on how to go about with that. So today is an opportunity among NGOs to further deepen this reflection, and with the steering committee we thought it would be interesting to start this deepening of reflection to see among ourselves the roles we have played already with the working groups, to learn from that and to try to take that information again in the exercise for the reflection that we will further feed.
Okay, thank you so much, Jorien. I thought that was really helpful, where some of this information is kind of like a historical snapshot of how NGOs have developed under this framework. Maybe some of the information we do know it, but it's good to see it just in one place there. It was the numbers of accredited NGOs. We saw that we went from 202 to 176. Maybe the reason behind these numbers are something that we need to consider, especially when we're talking about encouraging more NGOs to become accredited, especially from underrepresented regions. and seeing where we work and tying that back to the text of the convention and the operational directives was also helpful to see how are we interpreting this the convention text or the operational directives. Now, I think should we open up for questions? Okay. Well, I've got a question though. I'll start. Are there any negative elements, like when we're talking about institutionalizing and the governance of the NGO forum and kind of institutionalize it with the IGC? We've got the informal working group that are discussing ideas how we are going to integrate the forum into their meetings. Are there any negative elements that we need to consider that may arise concerning the independency of the forum?
Well, maybe it should not be only me to react on this, but already to start. Yes, that's, I think, what came up in the working group on the 7th of June, that next to indeed have an eye for this role as an umbrella organization and as a partner in the convention, we should also really care for the position that is an independent position of NGOs, and that will always be like a balance which we should be careful with. And I think as much from the side of NGOs as from the side of the states parties and the convention itself. So I think this is an ongoing process.
Okay, do we have any questions regarding the inter alia discussions or the role of NGOs under the convention? Oh, looks like we don't. Okay, then we can go to our next session of today, which is on the topic of research. When we hear research, perhaps the thing that occurs to us or what we imagine is something that's probably restricted to academia. But the work that NGOs do in research in regards to safeguarding intangible cultural heritage is quite important in developing our safeguarding methods. How can we strengthen community involvement in research? What are the interactive approaches to research? And what platforms are available to us for us to display or participate in research? I'm going to introduce Albert van der Zieden. Sorry for my pronunciation.
Almost right, yes.
Okay.
And I'm not going to do this alone, so I would ask Laurier Turgeon and Rob Barron and Valentina Zingari to join me in this presentation. Can we sit behind this table, all of us? Or and do all these microphones function? Okay, if everyone is seated, then we can start. We have half an hour to present our topic. And to be clear, the topic is not about the role of researchers in the ICA's convention. It's about the role of NGOs in research. And I think these NGOs have a very important role to play because they are, in a way, the link between the international level and also on the one hand, and on the other hand, towards the communities. So the strong role of NGOs would be to encourage community involvement and to give them a voice in this convention, but also to give them a voice in research, so that researchers, when they do research on ICAs, always involve communities in their work. Okay, can I have the next slide, please? You all know the working group research established in Windhoek in Namibia, and we always have meetings during the intergovernmental committee sessions, and symposiums just like the one in Jeju on focusing on identifying and inventorying of IGAs. Next slide, please. Next slide. So, 4 contributors, all experienced as researcher and all experienced in acquiring community involvement, and myself, Albert van der Zijden, Valentina Zingari, Robert Barron, and Laurier Turgeon. Next slide, please. When we talked about this beforehand, what I just talked about just now, the role of NGOs is mainly towards the communities, to give them a voice in research. And when you're talking about participatory methods in research, then you talk about community involvement, and you talk also about sharing authority, a famous phrase in participatory research. So sharing authority among scholars and community researchers, and also enabling community-driven research. Co-construction of new knowledge through participatory and interactive approaches. Next slide, please. Well, a bit of an advertisement, because participatory approaches are very important in this convention on all levels, also in research. And there will be a special magazine, a Portuguese magazine on this topic, Memoria Review, calls for papers, participatory methodologies and on intangible cultural heritage. And there will be one contribution of which I have written about NGOs and research. Next slide, please. Well, all of the NGOs here present are, of course, active on an international level, but there are also quite a few NGOs who are just active on a national level. And one example in this is my center, the Dutch Center for Intangible Cultural Heritage. And we have adopted the research agenda only well, a week ago. It was presented. And in this research agenda of course, has as its main objective strengthening the communities by way of participatory approaches. Next slide, please. So what we do is addressing the challenges of the communities. So not addressing the challenges of the researchers, but of the communities. And so we started by inventorying what are your challenges. For instance, when you are dealing with a topic such as tourism, you can imagine that there are challenges when you are dealing with tourism as a community. So this part of our research agenda especially focused on challenges and perhaps problems involving tourism. For instance, the threat of over-commercialization. So this is an example on a national level that an NGO takes care of what communities are busy with and doing research on topics which are of importance to them. Next slide, please. So I would now give the mic to Valentina. Yes. And an Italian researcher. So I give you the floor.
Yes. Good morning, everybody. It's an honor and a big responsibility to represent here a growing number of Italian communities and NGOs at work with the Convention for the safeguarding of ICH. First of all, next slide, I wish to recall some fundamental steps. Next slide, please, okay. Strengthen the importance of a process. Because it is very interesting to reflect about how to build a process, how the background of the research with communities is important, of sharing views, connecting the accredited NGOs at the national level. The process of networking in Italy started in Milano, where the Lombardy region supported the organization of a national meeting, it was the other slide, inviting ICH experts from Europe and other regions, of the world, putting them in dialogue with NGOs, researchers, and representatives of institutions at the national level. Two main meetings, the first in Milan, the second in Brussels in the same year, and the main dialogue on the role of civil society in a long-term process of safeguarding, generating innovative ways to research and knowledge production. Mediation, co-construction, critical awareness, and networking were the key words of this dialogue. The meeting between several Italian accredited NGOs and inter alia 3 national networks in the context of the ICH NGO Forum was crucial. SIMDEA, an Italian Museum and Heritage and Anthropology Network, UMPLI, National Union of Proloco, and AGA, an association of ancient games, local association transforming itself into a national network of communities of practice representing the Italian ludodiversity and part of an European NGO, the European Games and Sport Association. Meeting the challenge of inventory ICH, some main questions were raised. What, how, with whom, building a participatory research process in absence of a national strategy. The role of NGOs as bridge was often advocated. In this slide, you can see an interesting place in Italy. As an anthropologist, I started to use the paradigm in my own experience. And in 2014, in the frame of the forum, the meeting with this community-based experience of AGA originated a dialogue and a shared project of heritage making. The researcher view generated self-confidence on one side, while on the other side, the sharing of ICH safeguarding perspective showed a surprising living network of communities animated by a strong political vision aware of the values of cultural diversity. The next slide, please. Connected this world of local experience and dreams with cultural institution was the further step. Next slide. The next. Okay. On the ground, the organization of a training program, the Days of Intangible, launched an inventorying process based on 3 main elements. Next slide. The recognition and empowerment of a civil society network supported by local, regional, and national institutions, the building of a permanent training program as a space of communities narrative involving researchers and institutionals, and the opening of an inventory process supported and negotiated with institutions at the regional and national level. The next slide. The Lombardy region, the first region in Italy to invest on inventorying ICH through a participatory research approach and annual funding program, is supporting a pilot project of inventorying ICH conducted by a research working group involving ethnologists, young students, video artists, and members of communities. A participatory web ICH platform, a creative approach to documentation, an integrated consideration of heritage, connecting tangible and intangible in an articulated narrative approach is in progress. Next. To document and describe ICH involve creative young researchers in dialogue with communities. Next. The description of identified elements is discussed with communities in a multidisciplinary team, involving different sensibilities and competence, expanding the power of ICH. It is very important the role of this participatory web ICH platform, and we are developing a creative approach to documentation in a global and interconnected vision, putting in the center of the stage a community narrative as a complex fabric and a source of inspiration. The process is an ongoing process, but it's very important to think about this background, because of course we are now putting really in a very interesting and deep state the research, but the first and most important things is the process that we are building at the national and also international level. And as Yorin said, it's very important the role of ICH NGO Forum for this ongoing process of research in Italy, while a lot of communities are today involved, and this is a progressive an ongoing process, and the role of institutions to support is really crucial, and it's also a problematic thing to safeguard the independent vision of NGOs, but at the same time work in a dialogue with institutions. We think that this dialogue is possible, and we are leaving the concrete side of this choice, of this modality to put in work all this principle and concept and values of the convention. It is interesting also to think about the bridge that we are building between regional level and national level. We are involving institutions at different levels, at the local level, at the regional level, and the national level, but in an international and complex networking fabric. And communities are really sensible to this open networking work. Thank you.
Thank you, Valentina and Albert, for inviting me. I'm delighted to be here. I'm representing Robert Barron. I'm representing the International Society for Ethnology and Folklore, which is happily recently accredited and includes memberships of scores of nations, especially in Europe. And I would like to share with you some perspectives from my own experience and our experience in the United States, which has unfortunately been absent from so much of the discourse about among NGOs and hasn't been a signatory to the convention. So I hope that some of these insights and examples will be helpful in illuminating for ICH and the very important work that's being done. Next slide, please. What I'd like to talk about is about collaboration with communities for research, some of the conceptual issues, some of the examples, some of the challenges, some of the opportunities there, and questions of authority between researchers and cultural institutions and the communities with which they work. First, with some historical perspective, much of the paradigm shift in the way that communities relate to researchers traces itself to what has been called the dialogic turn in anthropology, and it's affected other fields. It's been a fundamental change in how scholars and cultural organizations relate to communities, and it's a movement from a top-down approach where the all-knowing expert, the academic, the curator, exercises their authority to a dialogic approach. The idea of dialogism comes from the great Russian literary theorist Mikhail Bakhtin, who says that meaning is something that's constructed through multiple voices, through an open and ongoing process, as something which is not a monologue, but involves the various perspectives and voices, and recognizes that in any human interaction and human communication, that both bridges people coming together and divides. And I think with the relationship of researchers and cultural institutions and communities, we have to recognize that there won't always be consensus. There'll be different approaches to knowledge and authority. In academic disciplines such as anthropology, folklore, ethnology, oral history, ethnomusicology, several others, there's been an approach to sharing authority and creating knowledge and producing knowledge for audiences, and books and other publications have been co-authored with this shared perspective as a joint operation. And with cultural organizations, of course, I'll be giving examples from the United States, but this is true elsewhere in the world, of course. Distribution of authority for curation and in project direction and full co-curation. Next slide, please. And there have been varieties of different kinds of partnerships. So sometimes in the different ways in which authority is held, sometimes there's a complete yielding of authority, and enabling community control is an objective continuously. Next slide, please. A pioneering example of dialogism in the museum field, where there have been many experiments, is the Museum of Chinese in America, which was founded in 1980, calling itself a dialogic museum. in this museum, since it's been established, the staff, the curatorial staff, the administrative staff, educational staff, shares authority with community members in conceiving together, developing, and interpreting the exhibition and producing public programs. So historical expertise, the interests, the research objectives of historians and people from other disciplines is combined with local knowledge. And I think in the process of research, we need to recognize that there's both expertise from scholarship and also local knowledge, which is equally valuable, and vernacular knowledge. Here's an example that I want to speak about from Houston, Texas, where after hurricanes devastated the area of New Orleans in 2005, there was a project that was developed called Surviving Katrina and Rita in Houston, involving relocated hurricane survivors. It's a community self-documentation project. What happened in this project is where participants were taught how to collect narratives about their experience of disaster and cultural recovery and interview each other. The folklorists involved in this project gave technical advice about the use of equipment and how to interview, while the survivors had complete responsibility for the interview and the interpretation. And a fundamental principle there was sovereignty over one's story, ownership of the narrative by the community themselves, and the idea of natural narratives that the speakers shape in the interviewing process. And what you have here with the narratives is narrative truth, which means what the community members, the stakeholders, believe about what happened, which is felt to be of paramount importance and was distinct from the media accounts, which were often racist and distorted, and would be different than what some historians or other scholars would look for in terms of a particular evidentiary interest in facts. The survivors were told in this process that they are the experts. However, the overall design and the objectives were framed by the folklorists, but the content, the interpretation, the perspectives of the community members, and what they were speaking about in the learning how to collect narratives is solicitous listening, meaning very careful and close listening, rather than directed interviews shaped and by the authority of a oral historian. Next slide, please. So these are some of the people who were interviewed from a variety of different cultural backgrounds, particularly African Americans in Houston. Next slide, please. There are also in the United States field schools, and we have a movement to train what are known as community scholars, where community members are taught to use documentary equipment, fieldwork ethics, designing projects, writing grants, and methods of archiving and repositories. And one example is from the Kentucky Arts Council. Please, next slide. And they're taught how to design projects and ethical practices, and the research process results in safeguarding measures, projects. So there was a mushroom festival about the morel mushroom. There was also an exhibition on funerary practices. So it's a process of learning how to do documentation and then creating a product from it. And I might add parenthetically that I feel that in the, maybe I have something of a distance perspective, but in the ICH movement, there's been an emphasis on inventorying. And I think a next frontier, a next dimension in research is deeper, more holistic documentation of communities, as is practiced in many parts of the world. Next slide, please. Here's a guide to folk life and fieldwork, cultural documentation, and it illustrates a systematic way of training members of communities. This is from the American Folklife Center of the Library of Congress. Next slide, please. So what's learned there is how to design a project. This is actually, the images from Kenya, where staff from the American Folklife Center trained community members, and there was a feedback loop of documenting an immediate response from documenting and teaching different dimensions of project design and documentation. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. Okay, so ethical practices, gaining rapport with community members, or with people who are interviewed by the community members, rather, and techniques of observation, participant observation. This guide deals with that as well, and ethical issues in what to document, when to document, how to document the community sensitivities. Next slide, please. And how to record, the technical dimensions of recording and carrying out interviews, how one proceeds in the process of doing an interview, and you know, little tips like don't interrupt the speaker, nod your head rather than speaking in the course of the interview. Very specific sorts of things that help along with the process. Next slide, please. And photography, technical dimensions of photography. This is a famous rule of thirds and how to frame a photograph. Next slide. And recording on location, how you record in situ, and the techniques of it. You see, you have an historical image there as well as a contemporary example of audio documentation in the field. Next slide, please. And then there's sample forums for the log that a community researcher will carry out in recording what was documented, studied, and that's something which is obviously useful for archival purposes. Next slide, please. And then a release form which protects the intellectual property of the community member involved in research. Next slide. As I'm drawing to a close here, of course, nowadays throughout the world, it's a really new situation where communities are documenting themselves to an unprecedented level because of the internet and camera phones and inexpensive video equipment. And there's a use of multiple platforms, YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, blogs, etc. So we have to think about that in terms of research as a medium of documentation, as also a platform for safeguarding and presenting cultural traditions. A few words about the Place Matters program of City Law, which is an NGO in New York City. It's centered on the content which is created for its website by residents of New York City who document places with local historical and cultural significance that may not be, typically not your high-style architectural landmarks or your monuments, but are deeply meaningful to people within the community, like a roller rink, a local candy store, a place that's beloved within the community. The website also includes a toolkit which instructs users in the documentary practice. Now, something which is interesting about the site from this perspective of sharing authority and comparing it with the project in Houston I mentioned is it's both user-generated content and places which are documented and interpreted by city law in a curatorial perspective from the folklorists and historians who are on the site. And city law acknowledges its curatorial authority in creating the content and shaping the website. So that's a bit of a distinction from the Houston Surviving Rita, Katrina and Rita project, where it was felt there was ultimate, complete authority given over to the community. Okay, so in conclusion in the next slide, well, these are some images from Place Matters, I'm sorry. So this is the site, and then the next slide illustrates the toolkit where you can see on the right column that you can go to different step-by-step processes of documentation and identifying these places of significance. So finally, in conclusion, in my next slide, here are some issues and opportunities I think we can think about in research with communities. First of all, community cultural self-determination is the ideal. This is a human right. This is a cultural right for communities to determine the direction of how their cultures are represented and interpreted. However, I think we have to recognize that authority is usually retained in varying degrees, even when it's shared. And there'll be asymmetries of authority. The researcher will frame the cultural organization, the scholar will frame the project, they'll design the overall direction of the project typically, and so there'll be some balance in authority, and hopefully it moves in another direction, it's equal, and then the community assumes control, and this is an objective in many of our programs in the United States. We should also recognize that there's both local and vernacular knowledge as well as academic expertise, and they both should be valued. They can be brought together when appropriate, and there are also multiple perspectives of about any event. We know this from Thucydides and a long history of understanding that there are many different ways of recognizing and interpreting, and communities aren't monolithic. And the multiple methods of training that need to be developed in the global ICH world, and we continue to try to do this in the United States with virtual platforms as well for learning how to document, how to inventory, and the products. And also, as Albert mentioned, that community partners can also research the impact of ICH in tourism and other ways. And I think that in critical heritage studies, unfortunately, much of it has been top-down, and the voices of community members can be heard more often in co-curated, jointly produced products. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, I'd like to thank Albert for inviting me. I'm delighted to be here. On behalf of the Folklore Studies Association of Canada, I wanted to present very briefly, because time is limited, work that a few of the members of the Folklore Studies Association and myself have been doing on collaborative research strategies and the uses of ICH in situations of natural and social crises. One of the things that I think was important in this work is that we realized that situations do contribute to the way collaboration will be worked out. If you're working in a crisis situation, there's going to be an incentive, a much stronger incentive for collaboration because people's lives are sometimes at stake, often at stake, and the risks are very high, and so the collaboration becomes something of a question of life and death, in a sense, in some cases. So those sorts of situations, I think, do play a role in the way that the collaboration will be developed. Incidentally, we liked to use the word or the expression collaborative research more than participatory approaches, but collaborative seem to suit the needs of these types of situations better. We've been working with in the Canadian North because that's where climate change has had the strongest impacts, and we've also developed an interest and have been working with people in Haiti because on the equator this climate change is also having an extreme impact on people's lives. So it's basically at the on the poles or at the equator that climate change is having its greatest impact. It was interesting to see how these collaborative approaches can contribute to having people better understand their situations, having researchers better understand local conditions, and having the two work together to try to resolve some of these problems. So I'll go through them. Next slide, please. Okay, so the climate change has become a direct threat to intangible cultural heritage as well as natural and built heritage, as you know. The tendency has been to attempt to safeguard through inventorying practices, awareness raising, and the transmission of ICH from generation to generation. But I believe there is more can be done. We can do much more to replace these rather passive approaches. ICH can itself be used as an active agent of adaptation to climate change. Traditional knowledge of nature and the universe especially, but also rites and rituals, oral traditions, etc., can be used effectively to help communities adapt to the changing environment and contribute to their revitalization after disaster. Next slide, please. For example, in the Canadian North, the collaboration between Inuit communities and scientific communities can help track down new migration movements of animals and find new sources of food for these populations. It is believed that within the next 30 years, the caribou herds will decline by 80%. So you can imagine that that will have an extreme impact on the living conditions of the Inuit. Slide, please. In Haiti, climate change has expressed itself through an increased number of hurricanes which have swept through the country and even the southern parts of the U.S. Matthew, for example, the most recent, which hit the southern part of Haiti in 2016. This is the city of Jeremy, 2 days after the hurricane struck. Next slide, please. Another image of the devastation that occurred because of the hurricane. Next slide. This is these are voodoo ceremonies that were undertaken just a few days after the hurricane in an effort of reconciliation to rebuild social cohesion and a sense of belonging to place, because of course after these types of disasters people have lost parents, their children, neighbors. They have also there's also a sense of loss of place and a desire to leave those places. And so these types of rituals are ways of, are methods of reconciliation and of sort of reconnecting with place and avoiding massive out-migration. Next slide, please. Now, another method that has been used has been festivals. For example, Jacques Mel, which was not as hardly hit by Matthew, but was very severely hit by the earthquake in 2010. The organization of the carnival there became a major objective for the communities, and they really made an effort to organize that carnival as a way of sort of psychologically overcoming the disaster. Next slide, please. So the methods used, getting to the crux of the presentation, the methods that have been most effective in from my point of view in collaboration have been the field schools, as Robert has indicated, working with the communities to provide them, help them develop tools so that they can preserve and transmit more effectively and develop their intangible cultural heritage. But also, what has been very effective has been a call for projects that has been sent to the communities, and they have, in Haiti, for example, in the last 6 months, we were able to convince the government to send this call for projects. 10 were sent out with a budget of about $7,000 American per project, and it is the communities that developed the projects according to what they considered their most crucial needs. This, I find, has been the most effective measure amongst those that we have experimented, at least. And there are also the experimentation together of new forms of applied knowledge. Next slide. Thank you. So that's it. Thank you again.
Well, thank you very much, and for all of you, Tuesday evening at 6 o'clock we will continue our discussion about this theme. So you're all very welcome on Tuesday evening from 6 to 8 here in this building. For some of you, I have also brought along a summary of our research agenda in the Netherlands. So everyone want to have a copy? Come to me and you will get one. Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you, Albert, Valentina, Robert, Loria, for such an insightful presentation. It was really important to see how this topic has moved from a top-down to what Robert called it, dialogue, and to see the examples of the Dialogic Museum, the hurricane survivors, and even the Place Matters website. I think these are examples, goes into, sharing our experiences in safeguarding ICH. So thank you again. I'm not gonna, if there aren't any questions, we can go to the next session because we are running behind. Okay?
Well, thank you. I think it was a very interesting topic, and we should discuss more about it on Tuesday. There will be a session, so please join us and talk more about research. So now, for now, I will present the role of NGOs in capacity building with Jorin Neyring and Marit Stranden. Marit is the CEO of the Foundation for Traditional Music and Dance from Norway. So thank you very much and welcome.
So hello everybody. Yeah, I think I'm a little bit in the middle of reflections right now myself on the role of the NGOs. And we had a plan to collaborate on this, but we never really had the time to meet. So I think I can say, well, this is my ideas. So then you can add if you have any comments. Next slide, please. And Joreen already took us through this, but I have it there, thank you. Yeah, so the advisory role is of course just a very few of the many accredited NGOs who can contribute into the evaluation body and into reports. Next slide, please. And also, it's the state party. Of course, it's a convention agreement between the different state parties, but the state parties shall, it's stated in the convention, work together with both when they should identify the elements and when they should do the implementation. They should, as much as they can, work with the community group individuals and the accredited NGOs. So in one way, we are very visible in the convention to prevent the top-down way of working, but at the same time, it's the state who's responsible for doing this. Next slide, please. And also, when it comes to reporting into the convention, again, the state should, as much as possible, include the accredited NGOs reporting the state reports and on the elements inscribed on the lists. So then it's a very much top-down responsibility to include us, but the intention is very good of involving community groups, individuals, and accredited NGOs. And then, of course, it's a huge challenge, but there are so few accredited NGOs in some of the regions. Next slide, please. And also, when we had, it's actually getting a bit old now, but when we had the evaluation of the convention, one of the most important limiting factors for implementing the convention and for developing the good safeguarding plans, which should be the main part of the convention, is of course funding. Funding is always a problem, but it's also the competence of the stakeholders and their level of understanding the possibilities and pitfalls of the convention. The intention of the convention is very good, but understanding the convention good enough to actually use it is limiting in all levels of the convention and the stakeholders. Next slide, please. Yes, and this you already mentioned. So it's really important with the capacity building to understand the convention good enough to use it as a tool. Next slide, please. And this is how it came up at the same time that we wanted to have a working group discussing capacity building. Everybody agrees it's really important, and how can then the NGOs work with it? We had some discussions, but then I think, again, we have so little time together to develop the structure of the NGO forum. So we do this 1 hour lunch discussion a year, which is not a lot of time to develop our ideas. But we had a good discussion in 2015 and 16. But what we want to share all the time is discussing and sharing methods on inventorying, documentation, sustainability, digitization. We are kind of discussing the same in different groups. We always have the challenge that some NGOs are at beginner levels. So The discussions also are not so progressing since we are at so different levels. I don't know if there should be some way of dividing us a little bit. But anyway, it's a need for capacity building that everybody agrees on, and NGOs could deliver capacity building courses. So then it came up. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. To build this capacity building workshop, it came up with the funding we needed, which is the limiting step. Did I have one before that? Yeah, the one before, sorry. And by making this new then capacity building workshop for NGOs, it was a new idea, so it was the first time it was developed, but it was taken, the lead was taken by UNESCO facilitator, Harriet Deacon, and ICH NGO Forum, together with the secretariats. Then we created an interactive and a very varied workshop format, which we think in the evaluation turned out to be very suited to this big group of NGOs. But again, we were stressing the sharp existing regional imbalance in the accredited NGOs. I mean, you can also see in the program today, it's mostly dominated by one regional group, which you can say is because there are so many NGOs in this region, but we really need to do something with this balance to get all the different voices represented. So for this course, it was made a big effort to select facilitators, lecturers, to reflect the different regions, languages, and gender representativity. We did manage to do that. We are really happy about that. And also to work on the visibility of the contribution of the NGOs. It was a call for submission of case studies, because the capacity building program of UNESCO already have a lot of good case studies, but we tried then to increase on visualizing the NGO roles in case studies, and we got 10 new case studies from this invitation. Now, next slide, please. So we did have last year the capacity building workshop. We had 60 participants from 32 countries, and we built a higher level of understanding. It was fruitful discussions, and I think that what happened every time we meet and do reflection like this, we progress. But then, since the arena, we are meeting so seldom, it takes many years for us to go where we want to be. But I think one of the good new steps last year was what we did. We initiated the regional working groups. Then you are in your region discussing, and of course this is also mirroring what's happening with the convention. So I think you go to the next slide. This is, I don't know if it's readable, it was the timetable for the course. And I think actually, of course, sharing is always good, but I think the most important thing was discussing in the regions for the first time. We were sitting around the table discussing, and we were supposed to have 3 different topics, but since it was again the first time, and with little time, we only got to the first point, everybody, I think. But we can go into, and this is my notes from that, so you probably have more points if you go to the next slide. We are all, we are very different. We have so many different roles. Let me see where I am. Well, whatever. And I think just from my NGO, we can have so many different hats. We are facilitating processes, we are translating between state and communities, we are practitioners ourselves, we are researchers, we are documenting, we are training, we are developing methods how to safeguard and pass on the tradition. So that's only one NGO working on all these levels, and then I know some of you are more facilitating. So I think we already do so much, and maybe what we need is to work more on the visibility, and I think it's a very good way it's heading with structuring us. I think we need structure. It's very good that we now have a board which now will be elected, And I think maybe one of the parts we really miss is now to connect the working groups together with the board, because we meet here and there's not so much communication during the year, which is not a critic to the board, which does a great job in starting to doing the structure. Because I think we already do so much good things according to the convention, and then to make that more visual, we need to work on how to structurize this work with the NGOs. Next slide, please. So to bring on the ICH NGO capacity building workshop, we really need a strategy to increase the involvement of the accredited NGOs. We can take forward a role of outreach and regional network building toward a larger audience, but I think most of us really do that today, so maybe what we most are missing is the visualizing point. We can try to contribute to these capacity building efforts to take our part in realizing the overall results, which again I think we mostly already do, and try to contribute to the evolving global capacity building program, which maybe then should be more on regional level to build and share in the regions and then share on the international level. And we really need to extend the accreditation of the regions where we now have few NGOs. So maybe that's where we could make the most difference right now, if we can find some strategy to reach more NGOs in these regions. And of course, it's always the limiting factor for further workshops is funding. Money. Yeah, so that's more or less as far as I got on my reflections. So really what we need to go on with this line of structurizing us, because that will make us more visible. And then the last part is not really finished, so I'm not sure if I should share it with you, but if it should be more visible under the convention, we should have more than 2 times 2 minutes ability to talk during the committee meetings. So if the states want to listen more and include more the NGOs, there should be some possibility for more dialogue during the committee meetings, because we sit on so much competence which we can share, and now we only share it through the state reports. But I don't know if the states will allow us that, so but that's maybe something to aim for, to actually have more discussion forums, maybe not as part of the meetings, but we are here today, but there are some state parties present, which we appreciate a lot, but there are not many who follow our work so closely. Would you like to add something, Sharon?
Just before we continue, I'm just taking in account the importance of the role of the states as well as UNESCO itself. I'm glad to hear that the Secretariat of the Convention, Tim Robbins, is here. So I asked to give him a welcome to the stage and to address a few words for the NGOs present. So let's welcome him with an applause. Thank you.
Thank you, and good morning, everyone. First of all, I apologize. I didn't think I would be coming up here this morning when I came to the center, so I'm not really dressed for a public appearance. We are extremely busy, as you might imagine, with all the last-minute preparations for the committee session starting tomorrow. So I won't take much of your time, and I'm also just speaking without much preparation, but I do think, and just having heard a little bit, I've been popping in and out on the side to listen what's been going on, some of the discussions this morning and what was just discussed now. Indeed, there's a number of items that I think is of interest for you as NGOs this committee session, but in particular, there's one item I think is very important, which is the item on on the item 13, reflection on the participation of NGOs in the implementation of the convention. And I think a number of you, I hope, have all received the questionnaire we sent out. And this is something that started last year, where I did hear some people speaking about it this morning. I think it's really time for the state parties and NGOs and all of us to reflect better on how the accredited NGO system can engage with the convention at many levels, not only at the level of the committees or the international level, but also obviously both at country level and community level. And indeed, I think the history of the convention was when this accreditation system was drafted, my interpretation that it was drafted somewhat with the World Heritage Convention in mind and the role of advisory bodies, which is an important role, but for which the convention does not need 170 accredited NGOs. And personally in the Secretariat, I'm not sure the way we are accrediting and the rules around accreditation and the criteria are really, I would say, sophisticated enough to understand the diversity of roles that NGOs play. So I think this is a very important process. We will hope to have a meeting next year. We're planning a meeting next year where you will be invited to participate. It may take a bit of time because these things have to go to statutory processes and eventually to a General Assembly to be adopted, and they need to be on a consensual basis between the states parties. But I would very much encourage you to actively take part in that process, to think it's an opportunity to think of innovative ways to further engage NGOs again at multiple levels with the work of the convention. So I think this is a very exciting committee meeting, the first of the next few. Probably next year it'll be developed more, but at least we don't quite have the full analysis yet of the surveys. We've only just started getting them back. So this year's meeting will be a kind of report, in progress report. But it will be an opportunity to get a sense of reactions from states parties. On the other issues, I managed to see some presentations about the role of ICH in emergencies, and this is very timely as well because, as you know, we are being asked to work on this issue, and of course the last presentation on capacity building. So it's very encouraging to see that you're reflecting a sort of in tandem with the issues that the states parties are reflecting. And that in itself is a role, let's say an advisory role in the convention. One more thing is the big achievement I think the convention made last year was the adoption of the overall results framework. And we will be now adopting also the periodic report forms and moving to a regional cycle of periodic reports. And I think it's worth reflecting, discussing on the roles of NGOs and civil society in that process. That will be very important. It's designed to be a broad view of the convention and to be able to monitor its progress. I think, having said that, I'd like to thank you, and I'm sorry I can't stay for long, but we have a very busy, the day before an event starts is always the most difficult day. So we have a busy time, and I hope you enjoy the next 6 days of the committee session. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your time, Tim. Well, thank you very much for the Secretariat for this kind time for addressing the NGO Forum. I also would like to point out that there is a live webcast on the UNESCO website. So I encourage you all to send, messages for people to see it. It's a live stream and it's in English and French at your disposal. Now we have to finish with Jorin. I'm sorry, we have the interruption on the capacity building. Thank you.
I already talked a lot, and there's many more voices in the room. Actually, I think what Marit said was really sharply framing the process indeed that we have done or tried to start developing with the capacity building. And indeed that in the reflection tomorrow evening also, I think we really should make progress with these regional networks and think how we can manage among us to get on with that process. But that's maybe something for tomorrow. But certainly there is a role on capacity building and then the link to the overall results framework, and also for ourselves how we can maybe find each other more easily in the regions and so on, as these international meetings are not feasible to do more than once or twice a year.
Thank you very much. So moving forward, I don't know if there is questions about capacity building. No? No questions? I would just like to point out to Marit that funding is always an issue, but there are ways, cheaper ways to get involved. Like I think we need to rely more on technology, and we have like this kind of resource that can help us just to be in touch and not too far away and not too distant from just seeing once a year, you know. So without further things, I'm going to introduce Monsieur Antoine Gauthier. He's from, he's going to talk on ethics. He's going to give us a nice talk on the topic of ethics. He also worked on the global framework, as you will know, and he comes from Quebec, from Patrimoine Vivant. So welcome, Antoine.
Gracias, Jorge. Merci à tous. I will speak in French, so it gives some work to our super translator. Merci beaucoup à tous ceux qui font le superbe travail de faire l'interprétation simultanée dans différentes langues. Donc je vais mettre en anglais certains textes et je vais donc m'adresser à vous en français. Je vais vous parler très rapidement du groupe de travail sur l'éthique qui a été créé à Windhoek lors de la session DISCOM. L'objectif direct était de suivre le dossier des 12 principes éthiques de la Convention qui était donc proposé à cette occasion-là. C'était de réfléchir lors du symposium de 2015 qui portait sur le thème de l'éthique, de réfléchir entre ONG, qu'est-ce qu'on pensait des 12 principes éthiques, de diffuser l'information et de réfléchir donc ensemble sur ce que voulaient dire ces 12 principes éthiques-là. Et donc, le Forum des ONG a d'ailleurs été l'instigateur de l'ajout d'un paragraphe dans une décision portant sur l'adoption des 12 principes éthiques. Donc, c'était parmi les bons coups, parmi les occasions de collaboration entre les ONG et les États parties dans le cadre du comité, ce qui est une excellente nouvelle et qu'on espère qu'il va toujours aller en grandissant, bien entendu. Ensuite de ça, en 2017, on a, avec Marc Jacobs et Jorijn Nerik, ici présente, on a fait une ébauche de propositions de principes éthiques. Personnellement, enfin, j'ai fait une proposition avec le groupe éthique qui était assez intéressante, mais un peu trop tarabiscotée, un peu trop complexe, surtout pour le peu de temps qu'on a ici pour réfléchir ensemble là, sur l'adoption de certains principes. Mais il est ressorti de cette discussion-là l'idée d'adopter au sein même du Forum des ONG, d'adopter quelque chose, d'adopter une résolution en lien avec l'éthique, formellement, donc au nom du Forum, je vais y revenir. Et il y avait également à cette occasion-là Marc Jacobs qui avait lui proposé, parler d'une plateforme en ligne en lien avec l'éthique telle que le comité l'a suggéré au secrétariat. Donc, je vais en parler très rapidement, mais je vais en parler rapidement puisqu'on va en reparler en fait lundi. Lorsqu'on va éventuellement adopter des choses ensemble. Alors, qu'est-ce qu'on a au tableau? Alors, allons-y, descendons donc en bas. Please go down a little bit. Merci. Down, 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 down. Let's begin with down, down, down. Okay, down, 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 down. All right. OK. Donc, avec Monsieur Marc Jacobs de Faro, Yoring Nering ici de Tapis Plein, nous avons préparé en fait un préambule. Au lieu d'adopter des principes éthiques tout à fait différents pour le Forum des ONG, on a pensé simplement d'adopter donc de ratifier officiellement les principes éthiques, les 12 principes éthiques de la Convention de façon active, mais les faire nôtres, donc en mettant un bout à la sauce ONG, donc avec un préambule qui statue sur qui on est, qu'est-ce qu'on fait, c'est quoi notre rôle et pourquoi on adopterait en fait les 12 principes éthiques de façon plus active pour nous. Donc, je ne sais pas si ça vaut la peine que je le lise ou si c'est envoyé. Qu'est-ce que vous en pensez? Je vais le lire rapidement. Puis de toute façon, c'est important puisque si on est pour l'adopter demain, c'est pas tout le monde qui aura le temps de le lire. Donc, alors, je le lis en quelle langue? Je vais le lire avec la langue que vous voyez, donc in English. Recalling the key role of non-governmental organizations for the safeguarding of intangible cultural heritage at the local, national, or international level, as recognized in particular by different groups and communities, states, and UNESCO. Recognizing that NGOs working to safeguard ICH, whether or not they're accredited by UNESCO, participate in the safeguarding of knowledge, practices, knowledge, know-how, and representation transmitted from generation to generation, important for the current and future generations. Wishing that all the cultural actors working to develop the various elements of ICH adopt and promote initiatives carried out with respect, including respect for human rights and the rights of indigenous people, and that in a spirit of sustainable development, equity, representativeness, citizen participation, and where relevant, peer evaluation, which is kind of something we advocate somehow in the NGO work. Stressing that across a wide range of domains, cultural elements, and contexts, NGOs must act ethically in all their spheres of work, especially in situations of awareness raising, consultation, production, dissemination, training, marketing, search for funding, resource allocation, inventories, intellectual property issues, political representation, tourism, research, museums, archival and documentary, web presence, and collaboration with states, including in the context of the preparation of periodic reports and measures of impact related to the overall result framework of the Convention. Reiterating the desire expressed by the ICH NGO Forum to collaborate with the 2003 Convention and its various bodies in strengthening the ethical principle of the said Convention. A bit down, please. Thank you. Accepting the invitation of the Intergovernmental Committee of the 2003 Convention to accredited NGOs to participate in enriching, sharing information, monitoring, and contributing to the updating of the online platform with ethical tools for the safeguarding of the intangible cultural heritage. Affirming that the ethical principles of the 2003 Convention can assist NGOs and all stakeholders who act both within and with them, particularly staff and administrators, whether on a paid or voluntary basis, and that these principles can act as a complement to other types of codes of conduct and existing ethical instruments to prevent and manage certain conflicts or tensions, or more broadly to guide action, reflection, or decision-making. Recognizing also that some NGOs themselves embody communities or groups of tradition bearers, particularly associations that include practitioner members. So we're basically saying here that some NGOs are, in a sense, communities and groups. The ICH NGO Forum meeting in Mauritius on November 25th endorsed the 12 ethical principles of the 2003 Convention, which you may know, but we will put it on the screen. Donc, vous êtes de toute façon censé connaître, évidemment, ces principes à la base des actions respectueuses de la Convention. Je ne les lirai pas, vous êtes censé les connaître, mais l'objectif, donc, c'est de faire une proposition à l'effet avec ce petit préambule très spécifique à l'action des ONG, donc colorer l'acceptation des principes éthiques de l'UNESCO, colorer de la couleur des ONG, tout en collaborant évidemment avec, en étant d'accord et en faisant nôtre ces principes-là. Donc ça c'est un aspect, on n'adoptera pas ça aujourd'hui, nous allons voir ça demain, mais vous allez déjà être au courant de ce que c'est. Si on remonte en haut, on go up, go up, go up. Merci. Donc, encore, again, up, up, up. Merci. OK. Then, there were, I wish Mark would be here to propose because, parce que Marc était celui qui avait fait la présentation sur ce sujet la dernière fois, mais l'idée est Pardon? Oui, demain il sera là. Oui, demain Marc sera là. On pourra présenter un peu plus en détail qu'est-ce que ça veut dire. Mais dans le fond, ce qu'on dit, c'est que donc le comité intergouvernemental a demandé au secrétariat de réaliser une plateforme en ligne qui inclurait notamment des outils éthiques. Donc nous, ce qu'on propose en gros, là, c'est de collaborer dans la réalisation de cette plateforme en ligne-là avec différents outils qui existent en partie probablement chez d'autres organisations internationales, là où il n'existe pas sur différents sujets éventuellement en créer ou en adapter. Bref, que les ONG collaborent activement à la création de cette plateforme-là. On en reparlera demain. Est-ce que c'est tout? Y avait-il d'autres choses? C'est tout. Voilà. On en reparle demain. Merci.
Maybe just to add to what Antoine has told, this serves as an introduction. It will be on the agenda tomorrow for the general meeting to discuss. And the agenda is ready in our email boxes now to send out, and we will add the document that Antoine just proposed in both languages, in English and French, so that you can have a reading. Also next to all the other presentations which we will circulate. But for that, it is important that all of you who are here and who want to share in the reflections and the discussions register on the forum's website. So for those who did not yet do so, please do, because then we have all the emails of the people we should circulate it to. So if you did not yet register for the symposium and for the activities of the forum, do it. Then after the meeting, I will send out the message.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Antoine. It was very interesting to hear such important topic, and especially these efforts to participate with the platform. Looking forward for it tomorrow. Are there any questions in the room concerning ethical? No? Ethical principles? No? Yes, Christian? Just push it there and then, yeah. No?
Hello?
I'm sorry, I can't hear you.
Christian is asking if there will be a possibility to make amendments. Of course.
Yes, of course. Tomorrow.
Yeah.
Tomorrow.
Yeah, so we will circulate the document and then there can be proposals. Yeah.
I'm sorry. Yeah. Yes, tomorrow we'll work on the of course, there will be circulating the documents. By the way, if you haven't registered at the NGO website, the NGO, ICH NGO Forum website, it's important to have your email so that all the documents and things that are going here on the 13Com can reach you. So please, if you haven't made your registration, do so. Now, for the next talk, I will give Reem the word.
Thank you. Okay, well, our next presentation is about NGOs sharing safeguarding experiences. Now, sharing our experiences in safeguarding ICH is very important for us to learn from each other good safeguarding practices. And Heritage Alive, which we are all familiar with, has been doing that beautifully during the past few years on topics such as traditional medicine, traditional food, and woodwork, I believe. So I'm going to hand over to Ivan Falk, the Editor-in-Chief of Heritage Alive.
This one, okay. Thank you. I am happy to be here, to be invited, and I will talk about the role of NGOs and safeguarding experiences. I have written a paper, which I think will be distributed at some point, or, yeah? Good. So, next slide, please. Yeah, I think it's important to stress that the general nature of ICH is the practice is connected to people, it's connected to humans, to individuals, and to practitioners, bearers, and communities. So, and I think that, it has been, as has been mentioned before by previous speakers, but the importance of the term community in the convention is really important. It's mentioned not less than 29 times just among the 5 questions at the representative list, where you are in the form at the representative list. So this shows the importance of the community's role in the convention. And I think this is one of the main reasons that the NGOs will have a crucial role in the convention, and should have a crucial role in the convention, because we are the one who are in the field working with the practices, with the communities, and directly with the bearers and the practitioners. And because ICH is something vibrant, something that is concrete and alive, and it's not just an abstract element on a list. It's not just something on a paper, but it's something that is alive and among people. And this is where the NGOs has a different role, significant different role, compared to the state parties, for example, and to the Secretariat of UNESCO. This is why the NGOs are so important. So the idea behind the work with, among other things, but Heritage Alive, for example, is that we could create a platform for exchange of experiences among the NGOs, where we could share experiences from the field. It could be good experiences, bad experiences, and it could be for inspiration, to learn from each other, and to share methodology, and so we could improve our work and learn from each other. Next slide, please. So this was the basic idea behind why we established the Heritage Alive at the 9th Com in Baku. And this is the happy family. This is the first, or it's well, I'm not sure if it's the first, but this is because this picture is taken in Windhoek. But the picture is from Windhoek, and it's from the 10th Com, and it shows the editorial board at that time. Among these members, I can see that Jean Roch is not longer with us, unfortunately. But most of the other people attending on the picture, they are still working in the board. Jean Roch passed away, unfortunately, last year, but he did a great job. But we started with establishing an online journal because it would be a platform where we could easily share our experiences. And it shouldn't cost too much, and we started to get in articles from the NGOs, and it should not be necessarily academic papers or something. It could be easily accessible to write and to share the experiences from the field, and we have done that since 2012. Experts and NGOs has been sharing articles on our online web page, and from different parts of the world, from all the regions, and covering a huge range of different domains or issues and themes. And I think I have to like to thank the editorial board because it has played such an active role. We had a lot of members. I mentioned Jean Roch, but there's also a lot of other members of our editorial board who has done a really great job. And I think it's a wonderful thing about internet that we can actually do this and perform this work sitting in Uganda and in India and all around the world, and we can help each other. Like Ananya is covering. She's a great helper from India, but also others. So I think I would like to thank very much the editorial board, because without being such a vibrant group that think this is important, it's very hard to do this important work. So next slide, please. So then we discovered that we should maybe concentrate on such special themes, and there was a suggestion, and why should we not focus on? We should focus on traditional medicine, and there was a huge feedback. Lot of interest on writing, sharing experiences on traditional medicine. So we received several contributions from all over the world, covering all the different regions, and it was, I think we received together 19 different articles altogether. So this was, well, it was nice, but it was also a shock and a burden for a big working load for the editorial board. But then when we met in Addis Ababa, we had a meeting with the ISHCAP, you know, the Category 2 Center in Asia and the Pacific, and we presented this as a possibility. Why should we not? Can you help us? You are experts on publications. Can you help us so that we can make a book, concrete output of all this wonderful material? And ISHCAP, they said, yeah, we have to think about it, but we think it's a wonderful idea. And with the help of ISHCAP, we managed in Jeju to present and have at the Heritage Alive Symposium, we presented a book on traditional medicine, which is really nice because it's also a concrete output, something visible out of what the NGOs do, and it's with contributions from all over the world, and I think the help from ISHCAP has been really valuable. So we really want to continue our cooperation, and we actually last month we had a meeting in Jeonju in Korea where we decided to go a step further, which I will talk more about at the Heritage Alive Symposium, and also a piece slightly on the next slide. Yeah, we decided actually that we should make a new book together, and in Jeju, not Jeonju, but in Jeju, we at the last committee meeting we said that, well, we should make a new book, and the themes should be either wood carving or traditional food. We should see what receives most feedback, what is most popular. So we made a call. We said open now for NGOs and experts to send us articles on the themes wood carving and traditional food. This is also, it's now confirmed, as I mentioned, by ISHCAP that they are participating. And we have already received 10 articles. And we can see which way the wind blows. Because 9 articles is on traditional food and 1 is on wood carving. So, yeah, I think we will end up with a book on wood carving. No, I was joking. It was just to see if you were following me. No, probably there will be a book on traditional food, and we still have the opening for more articles. And I think some of these articles are so good, and you can look forward to this. But there is still an opening for more articles. And I'm in dialogue with some of you that have said that you want to contribute, but you have not yet written or finished your articles. There will be an absolute deadline on the 1st of May 2019. Absolutely deadline. So that is the last. So now I mentioned that. And the book is going to be presented at the 14th COM. And I would also like to say that if any of you would like to join us in the board, there is always space for hard-working people that like to go through the articles, and so you are welcome to come with us on board. Please, next, please. Yeah, I'd like to mention also another example of how to share experiences we have, which I know well. And in the Nordic countries has established a web page for where we can share the safeguarding practices in the Nordic countries. And we can say that the main purpose of the website is that we can present good practices that we have in safeguarding intangible cultural heritage in the Nordic region. So I think that maybe some of you have already checked this out and checked out the website, but it's updated all the time with new contributions, and I think it's a lighter way of sharing good practices than reaching the level of the register, the Good Safeguarding Register of UNESCO. So this is an easy way. It's more easy way to share practices, which I think, and this is in the same line, learning from each other, sharing experiences. And so far, the contributing countries are Sweden, Finland, Iceland, Denmark, Greenland, and Norway. And also the territories, Faroe Island and Åland, has a reserved place on the site. And yeah, please, next slide, please. Yeah, there you can see the web page, the address to the web page. And Dag is here. He has a postcard that he will can distribute. Can you raise your hand, Dag? So you can get a postcard from Dag afterwards, where he has this address to the web page. But we think it's a good way to bring the 4 innovative and creative practices and raise awareness of common identity as well as diversity in the region. And it's a way to join forces to harmonize the implementation of the convention in So they are. Yeah, next slide, please. Yeah, I would like to sum it up. I think it's. I like this the slogan from the underground in England, where they say, "Mind the gap, mind the gap." And I think the NGOs, we play a crucial role, as I mentioned in the convention, and we are actually the one who are minding the gap between the communities and the practitioners on the one side, and the state parties and UNESCO's Secretariat and the convention on the other side. And I think it's really important that when we talk about the role of NGOs and how, I think this is our strength. This is our main role. This is where we are the one who are minding the gap. Without us, they have a problem. So I think this is why the NGOs' experience and reflections from the field are vital, and it needs also a platform for sharing. I would like just to, if I can have 2 more minutes, okay. So I would like to say that we are going on Wednesday. We are going to have a symposium for the heritage. We are going to have the Heritage Alive symposium, and I would love if you all come there. We are going to present 2 of the articles that is going to be published in the new book on traditional food. And it's going to be, the presenters are Valentina Zingari, which are going to present her article on alpine communities and their food heritage as ICH. And there is also one article from Hari Shim that has already been presented on the webpage that you can go and have a look at, which is on the really interesting issue: how do North Korean immigrants recreate their authentic taste of home that they never had? And this research is done in Malden, UK. So I think this is a wonderful opportunity to get a taste of what we are going to present in the book. Well, thank you very much.
Thank you, Ivan. Such a nice presentation to see how Heritage Alive, and I mean all of you, the whole team, how you really are raising awareness of cultural diversity and sharing good and bad practices, as you said. I absolutely agree that we are kind of minding the gap in a way, and I think that's a point that Jorien touched on in her presentation, where our value is in not just how close we are to the communities, but in our exact position in between the community and the state parties, the policy makers. So no doubt we are playing a very important role. I do have a question, though. You mentioned that since 2012, Heritage Alive has been publishing articles online and NGOs have been contributing. It wasn't until last year that an actual publication was sent out or distributed with the help of ICHCAP. That's probably another point, how sometimes the promotion of ICH safeguarding is restricted in terms of funding and things like that. But did you find that the actual printing of a hard copy of the publication, did it have an effect on, let's say, how many contributions you got afterwards, or any follow-up projects? Or do you find it's kind of the same if it stayed as an online journal or a printed publication?
Yeah, I think that is a good question. I think I think the first wake-up call that we had was for interest for contributions was actually the theme. The first one was the theme that we had on traditional medicine. And when we had the theme traditional medicine and we launched that and we presented that, there was a lot of interest. And from there, when we decided to publish a book, the interest was increasing. And I think one of the reasons behind all the articles that we have received now, I mean, it's 10 articles, or is that we actually, that people, I think it's fun to be online with an article, but I think people think it's even better to be on a hard copy. So I think it's nice. It's something substantial. It's something concrete, and I think it's a really, what do you say? It's a carrot, or it's good for people to. I think it's nice, and also I think the quality of the articles receive or serves a format like a book. So I think it's really good. And I think it's also from I was very happy to hear the feedback from ISHCAP, because also ISHCAP, from the ISHCAP side, they felt that this was also a very good move for them. And I think this is a way that we can, in our cooperation, we can use the possibilities that we have as NGOs, as Category 2 centers, and as different stakeholders. I think that is really, that's a huge possibility. But yes, I think the hard copy was a wake-up call.
Yeah, well, I'm a definite supporter of the hard copy. I do think it's a good incentive, kind of like a celebration of NGOs, you know, contributing in their work. It's just something that they can kind of hold in their hand and, you know, appreciate. I think we're all looking forward to the Wednesday symposium, so we'll see you there. But lastly, I'm just asking for a friend. What's going to happen to the wood carving article?
What? Yeah, the wood carving article. Yeah, it will be presented online. Yeah, because we cannot make a book just on the wood carving article. I'm very sorry about that, but we wanted to present it at the symposium, but the author was not able to be here, so that's why yeah, you know that. But it's a wonderful article, and it will be presented online. Yeah.
Thank you again, Ivan.
So let's move forward. We're on time, which is wonderful. So now let me introduce Professor Sun Shiol Park from the Center of Intangible Cultural Studies. He's the director of ICH Archiving, and he's professor of computer engineering at Chonbuk National University from Korea. Thank you, Professor.
Thank you, George. During the Jeju workshop for NGO capacity building in 2017, NGO network was reconsidered in the region, Asia Pacific region. We have discussed possibility to expand the necessity of network building through ICT to other regions as well. In particularly, the web ICH inventory system would be used in a decentralized way of communication and networking for safeguarding ICH. It also broadened its use as a variable tool that helps various researchers and promoters in the field. I'm going to introduce about ICHNGO.net, which may be the ICH NGO platform, if you agree. This system is for you, NGOs and the ICH community, and you can present your works and their works through this system, and it is developed based on Wikipedia. Next, please. Yes, this is Wikipedia homepage, and then we will discuss about this. This one is later. And next, please. And this is main page of the ICH platform. It has 4 different function keys above, which are represented for 4 different type of ICH collections, such as inventories, events, news, and Instagram. All 4 type of collections are shown on the screen together, sorted by the latest first order. That means latest item is first to show. On the right hand of screen are the search windows and calendar function key, and the link of ICH NGO forum, and the link of ICH shopping mall. We developed a shopping mall for the ICH holders, and a CGI link, so on. This is inventory page, and the inventory data are also sorted by the latest first order, and those data are just the samples. We have just only 3 because this is just sample in order to test the system. The right side is one of inventory data, Falcony, which is one of UNESCO representative, the ICH list. Its structure includes multimedia data and its descriptions and its values on the world map. The metadata of descriptions follows UNESCO description models. So this, the description structure is all exactly the same as UNESCO model. The structure of events, news, Instagram are almost similar, but a little bit different. For evidence, dates of evidence is very important, and the event structure includes the dates when the events will start and end. For the news story is important, which can be represented by text. For Instagram, it is include one image or several, like Instagram, with or without the description. We applied this property when designing system. Let's see event. Those events are also sorted by the latest first order. Each event is combined with calendar in the system. The events are appeared in the proper data box in the calendar as a bar type. If you click an event bar in the calendar, you will see the event more detailed. The search functions. These show the search function process. In this case, the search function word is Falcony, and the keyword is highlighted as red character in the search data. Next, please. The ICH online shopping mall, we developed that one also, but it's Korean version, but you can use international version too. And CGI informations are linked to the system. The shopping mall is for ICH community and groups and individual holders who want to learn their online business for their living and for ICH SDGs. This case is for 5 Korean ICH bearers products. This shopping mall can be learned internationally, and CGI data, CGI stands for community and groups and individuals, shown on the right side in Korean traditional musician. He is also already passed away. Through this system, the ICH folder can introduce themselves and advertise their works worldwide. This is login and sign up processing. This screen shows how to log in and sign up process. we need, for writing some the contents, we need password and ID. But even though you have you have the if you want to get the logon ID, you must be one of the member of NGO or the CGI. This shows the data upload process. Left is input form to upload each inventory data. Right is for events and news and each gram. Though we have only two, the input forms is very simple. You can upload your data very easily. Our hardware server is located in Paris now through Amazon Web Service. We plan to add 2 more servers at United States and Korea in the near future. And, okay. Next, please. This system provided for everybody to read the data, but uploading data is limited. Sign-up users can upload data to events, news, and each gram, but not for the inventories. Only authorized user can upload data to the inventories. For this, we use simple database technology now, but we also can consider blockchain method for this. However, the blockchain costs very much money. We are now web design, the future work for ICHNGO.net. We are not web designer experts, so we need some people who is expert for web design. We have to consider better UI and UX. That means user interface and user experience design for our system. For system stabilizations, we need to discuss about and work more for the system's OS. Now we're using Linux system, but sometimes we have to consider Windows or the Mac, and web browsers, Android or iOS for smartphone, and metadata standards for each inventory system. Also, we need to consider whether we use blockchain to get the authorization to write data in inventory category. Yes. As concluding remarks, I would like to sum up the meanings and scopes of my presentations. First, ICH board is simple. ICH NGO.net is very simple and easy access for every NGOs. Second, it is democratic management for NGOs because everybody can access that information. And yes. Third, no competition for inventorying of lists. UNESCO list has made a big contribution to safeguarding ICH. However, the listing turns out to be very competitive. Fourth, it is inclusiveness of information. Fifth, it encouraged cooperation and networking among NGOs. And then I suggest take off your smartphone from your pocket and type ICHNGO.net. Now, let's type ICHNGO.net in your address window of the browser in your cellular phone and see what happened in the past and what will happen in the future in each related works. And sometimes, why don't you upload your ICH works into each NGOs.net? Thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor Park. I see that you're working hard on the programmation now of the ICH NGO network. As a member also of the ICT for ICH, I'm really happy to see that you're really working on the subject and especially doing an open interface so that all countries can contribute and can take this and to build upon it. I think we have saw through the day many expositions and presentations talking about their efforts in ICT with different platforms and different ways of understanding the platforms. I really think that we must come together to find the best in as the cheapest, as the best way to transfer all this knowledge and to interconnect all the efforts, because in a sense it's like everybody's working their own platform, but we're doing that in an isolated way, and we need to build bridges among us and try to build something broader. And I think that's really the most interesting part of what you're doing with ICH Net.
Yes.
Thank you very much, Professor. Is there any questions? Yes, please.
It is not really a question, but Jorge, if you can also, touch on the topic of database where we try to map competencies and invite people so that we can take it forward.
Okay, so I think the database is a very good subject that Anand is talking about. I don't know if someone would like to talk about their database. We're trying to build a database on not only of the NGOs within the website, but also their work, what they're doing, best safeguarding practices. I think this is very important. This database is working on the address is ICH Forum, ICH NGO Forum. It's the website for the steering committee. This is where the activities are happening from all the steering committee activities are announced, so you can check it out. I think what Professor Park is complementary doing is something that helps build up all this information. I don't know if there is something that you would like to address specifically from the database, Ananja.
Maybe I can add to it. Actually, for a few years, we had this idea on the roles of NGOs, and that the accreditation system does not give enough possibilities to document the competences of the different NGOs, and then we have been starting to think to have a database ourselves that is complementary to the database of the Secretariat, where the information of the accreditation is already online on the UNESCO website. We came up with a proposal a few years ago, but then the UNESCO website itself would be renewed, and it was better to wait. And I think we all feel and see that it's coming up. Last year there was the idea of having regional networks, and then there was also the proposition to have this ICH NGO net. I think the time is really ready to try to integrate all things now. We have the forums website where forum activities are announced, but this is not a good instrument to accommodate other needs and potential that we are ready for to take the step now, and that we have just seen in the presentation of Mr. Park. There's many more possibilities to link on an international level the things. On the other hand, there is also still the question of documenting the competences of the NGOs themselves, which we should really do in a dialogue with the UNESCO Secretariat so that the systems integrate one to the other. So we have many parts now, and also the system of ICH NGO net would be very helpful for the regional networks, because then they can start communicating their own activities among each other and get more easily have the overview and get in touch and so on, which is not possible now with the forum's website. So there's a lot of possibilities, but also some work to further make it complementary and integrated.
Yes, and you know, it's very interesting because we were talking about it with the meetings. We need to open more participation for the organizations in a sense that we have clear emails. For instance, we have a database of over 1,000 emails, but there is only 176 organizations. So I think we have some extra emails on the database, which is not bad. But the idea is that we really know who are the accredited organizations and the people who's working on them, so we can make an effort to try to build something with the people that's actually in the organization, and that we can build with them the information. Because I think the main thing about all these tools is that we need to use them. So they're open tools and they're made for you, and there's a lot of people sharing their time and their effort, and it's open so that you take advantage of it. And if you need some extra thing, you know, specific for your region or your NGO, I think it can be developed. But the most important thing I think we can take from this is we need to participate and be more active in this collaboration and this talking among us. So we can build something as a whole group of accredited NGOs. So that's it. So just something else, Professor?
Yes. Actually, for this work, George helped us a lot through email, and thank you very much. Okay. Yes. Also, why don't you take off the smartphone, cellular phone, and type ICHNGO.net? Okay.
Okay.
It's okay?
Thank you. So I will now give the floor to Reem, who is going to take us to lunch.
Yeah. Well, yeah, okay. So now we have a lunch break. When we come back, the interpreters aren't going to be with us, so I'd just like to thank them. Thank you very much. And after lunch, yep, we clap. After lunch, we're meeting in the NGO room upstairs. So don't come back here, go upstairs.
Amphitheater. Mention amphitheater.
Yes, it's the amphitheater. Okay, and lastly, I saw a few of you taking photos. We did not organize a photographer, so please be our photographers. And if you got any good photos, send them to the ICH NGO Forum website. Thank you. See you after lunch.
Maybe the Secretariat can help us. Susanna, where can we go for lunch?
Well, I was actually also still waiting for some information from